Recording. All right. Um, Christopher Field, thanks for being here today with us. Excited to hear about your practice. Christopher is an artist, writer, and musician. He holds a BA in Media Technology and Art from Denison University and an MFA in Dynamic Media from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. He has taught at St. Cloud State University, Morehead State University, and Boston University. He's currently based in North Adams and Fall River, Massachusetts, and is the co-founder of Carriage House, a studio and publishing house that is perpetually TBD.
Uh, Thank you. Um, it's good to be here. Uh, I put together a, a keynote with a bunch of stuff in it, and I'm just gonna kind of go through it, and it's gonna be roughly kind of chronological, I think, which made the most sense to me. But it's gonna be free flowing and hopefully interesting, and then at the end, if anybody is still here, we will. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I put it together with just uh, the idea of an introduction to like the kind of work that I make and how I go about it and sort of my thought process. And hopefully there's some stuff in there that is interesting or helpful to you as you do your work and, get on with it. So I guess it's been a bit since I've done this, but I guess I'll try to share my screen. Is that what I do here?
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Okay. Is that working?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
That's the right school? Texas State?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Today's the 27th. Okay. Um, Great. Just to give you a framework for what we're going to do, I guess I laid that out, but I'll talk a little bit about like where I come from and um, just to give you some background on that. I'll talk a lot about some work that I've done and projects. I always think of things in terms of projects, and then again, we'll have time for questions probably if need be. I'm going to start with what is kind of my artist statement. You know, things change over the years, but this is pretty solid. I'm interested in the connection between visual media and emotion on both an individual and a mass cultural scale. Mass culture scale. My work often filters and repurposes media content to explore its effect, whether intentional, implied, or imagined, on those who experience it. Um, yeah, so that's just kind of a lens through which to kind of perceive what I'm talking about here, um, as we progress. Um, Usually in my work, and this might sound like inane or oversimplified, but it always comes usually from an idea or concept. I'm not the kind of uh, artist who works in one medium and kind of refines that. I've never really been a specialist, whether it's in, art or design or anything else. I like to I like to go where the ideas take me. So a project usually starts with an idea versus like a form. Then it's like, what is the best medium for that idea? And again, I like to let the idea dictate that. I'm really interested in how the same idea expressed in different media, how the media changes how that concept or idea is delivered or is perceived by someone. Um, and then I always consider the audience, like who is the audience? Now, that could be That could be many people. That could be, I have a show that's going to be at a gallery in this city and state. You kind of have a general sense of who might come into the gallery. That might just, from a very broad standpoint, give you a framework. Or it could just be your audience is one person. The writer Kurt Vonnegut uh, always talked about he wrote for his sister. Like he always was thinking about what his sister might think of the work that he did and as he was writing. So um, I think as an artist or a designer, it's really important just to think of something be outside of yourself. Like how might this be perceived? Again, that doesn't mean create something that everybody's going to like. But I think it's helpful just to think in terms of audience, and that can be interesting how you define that for yourself as you make stuff. Brief bio. I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Um, that's me as a kid. That's my family. I have two sisters, my dad and my mom. My dad's deceased now, unfortunately. That was me. Um, Growing up in the 80s, um, we had an Atari computer, which was like a weird, it was like pre like gateway, pre PC. My dad was into this for some reason, so we had a computer kind of earlier than most families that I knew. So I think from 6, 7, 8 years old, I used a computer. Now, as you know, if you're in your 20s, that you're like great, so what? But in the 80s, that was a little bit different. So I always kind of had a computer as something that was in our house and something that we like used, whether it was to play games or to like write papers for school or whatever. That's a little different than some people that were maybe slightly older than me. Also, we had a very proto modem thing that allowed us to get on the early internet, like this bulletin board system where you could like download games and like chat with people. And again, this was like really like beige plastic hardware in the 80s, floppy disks and all that kind of stuff, which is probably like in now, but it wasn't for a long time. A huge cultural thing for me was that we had HBO growing up. Again, now this is starting to feel very dated, but again, we're going way back in time to the 80s. Uh, Now that we have, HBO Max at our fingertips and we can browse HBO like kind of on or the ability to just tune into it and have these kind of like movies perpetual like in the 80s they always had the same like handful of movies playing at the same time. So kind of like that kind of different experience of time-based media of where it's kind of almost on a loop and you're kind of reacting to it was very formative for me. Later we had a PC, a Gateway 2000, probably in the early to mid 90s, early 90s. And I started experimenting with the sound recorder. I don't know if anybody ever used this in like Windows, but I figured out how to like layer sounds together in it. And that was probably like the first art that I ever made was probably using this sound recorder app to just mess around and uh, play like a keyboard. And thank God that computer is like in a landfill somewhere because there's probably some embarrassing stuff on there. Then as an adolescent, like I started a band with my high school friends, Stereo Soul Future, and we're still to this day, even earlier before this call, I was recording some guitar parts for a project. This is what we looked like in 1998. Uh, that's a film photo. I'm in the lower right-hand corner. But that was like the first organized creative work that I did with other people. And collaborating with other people has always been really important to me, from the time I was about 16 to now. And then over the years, we've continued to make music. This is a bunch of videos that I made, shot, or edited. To give you a little taste of that. And all of our stuff is available on streaming services if you're curious. It's kind of like melodic indie rock for the most part. Um, Here's some more stuff. This one in the upper left-hand corner was recorded over COVID with a green screen. Uh, Two of the guys live in California, and two are here on the East Coast. So it's fun to figure out ways to collaborate um, across the internet. And our two most recent I can't my our two most recent releases are EPs. So these are the last two that covers the last two, and I did the artwork for these as well. What's next? Oh, and then here's a video that I'm not going to show, but I'll show it. Well, I'll show. Think of all the little things I miss. All right, that's all I'm going to say. Can watch it on YouTube if you're interested. Then I went to college. I went to Denison University in Ohio. It looks like this. It was a quaint little liberal arts college. Notable alumni from Denison: Jennifer Garner, the actress, Steve Carell, uh, and the late Hal Holbrook. So some famous actors kind of came through there, which had a funny little theater department. I majored in something called media technology and arts, and art or arts, depending on how they were spelling it at the time, um, which was like an interdisciplinary major that allowed me to study is kind of a loose term, do make stuff in different forms that I was interested in. So, audio engineer, I was from playing in the band and like recording with the band. I was really interested in sound recording. So I learned some technical skills like very different now. I mean, just basically people were using a computer to record in a proto sense back then, but it was a lot of analog equipment. The concepts are still the same, and it's nice to know that stuff now. But then some art classes and some cinema classes. They call it cinema at the school. So I shot like 16 millimeter film and learned how to edit that by hand cutting it, and I was actually really not good at that. But that was a formative time for me. Yeah. So here are the things that I did, and also some writing in art. Then I moved to Los Angeles, as I was talking about a little bit before this actually started. My wife Sarah was studying architecture school is in architecture school at SciArc downtown LA. Um, and I moved out there to be with her, and I worked in film and TV production while I was there. Um, Such notable things that I worked on included a Nickelodeon show called Just Jordan, a David Mamet movie called Red Belt, which is kind of an interesting watch if you've ever seen it. The Notorious, A Shot at Level Two Tequila. I was the art department coordinator on that, and it was shot at a mansion on Mulholland Drive, and I had to do things like order fabric for a like 30-foot wide bed that the art department had made. So that was pretty interesting, cool. And then I worked on a film with the actor Bill Pullman. That's me when I was younger and had long hair. Um, that was us at a rap party in Los Angeles. Uh, did that for about 5 or 6 years, enjoyed it, came back to Boston after my wife graduated and went to grad school at Mass Art. Another nebulous major, dynamic media, which can kind of mean anything that you want it to mean. But generally speaking, if you're like, what does it mean? Things that I studied: interactive design, narrative, which can mean a lot of different things. But I was thinking about it narrative in terms of like time-based media. Um, Learned a little bit of coding stuff. Uh, and then eventually my thesis work evolved into a lot of like video installation work. And here's a piece that was an important piece for me in grad school, end of grad school, called Close Your Eyes, Drive as Fast as You Can. I'm going to show a little video documentation.
One last slim girl, slick fish, swimming in teal. Once we from its lattice of leaves, lie down the corridor and yet come back. How none of these bodies, all those stinglates, fungus and gas. Alone, I doze on the couch. The room fills with smoke. Years later, here's the part I go back and shovel all in, and the parts I still don't forget. We're like them, smaller and smaller, and nothing but blue horizon. If only it wasn't spring, if only the rain would stop and starlings weren't distracting. Something to stay with you, a dent in your nose. Something to stay with you, a dent in your nose. Your steering on your life, state ranks failed, vaccine on. There's a dark house in the everyone you've ever known saw. Close your eyes, drive as fast as you can.
Um, so that piece was just to give it a little bit of context, you know, I was interested in this idea of video portraits. So that was myself, obviously, and then my father, and we were reciting fragments of poetry by this author, John Loomis. And everything was on a loop, but like asynchronous loops. And I was really interested in how those things could kind of over time create different juxtapositions and then like projecting in physical space and having the images mixed together across. That was this netting material that allowed the image to both like capture but also move through, and then people could walk through it. And just like taking the idea of a video that we are used to seeing on a screen or a phone or whatever, and making it more physical, making it into physical space in some way. So then some more work and projects. Uh, Interactive work, um, installation, public art, video work, digital media, some general categories as we proceed. Spam stream. This was a big project for me. I was talking about it recently and realized that in some ways it's really outdated, but that's kind of the point of it. With AI now, and people now have conversations with their phone like it's nothing. This has happened really quickly. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. This project started, 10 years ago, and it was originally about speech recognition, and I started getting these weird emails that everybody I think gets at some point, but spam emails, but not like phony emails saying like, "Hey, I'm a prince. I'm a temporarily inconvenienced prince. Like, click on this link." Um, but gobbledygook, sort of just a bunch of words jumbled together, and I was curious like where these were coming from, so I started collecting them, and I was curious like, all right, if these are, I just thought maybe they're coming from a bot or a computer in like Russia or someplace weird, and not that Russia's weird, but like, but I guess it is. But so where's this stuff coming from? And if you fed it back into a computer, what would happen? So this project was about
Abruptly her.
these phrases, and I collected these phrases, gave them to my friend to read, Brian, who's in my band. Oh wait.
Allergy asthma doctor. Cancun contest. Shirt tee wet. Club iguana tailed. Guaranteed online personal. Image religion spirituality. Linwood part pole. Online Caribbean stud.
Um, so that was Brian recorded all those things into phrases. I decided that there were seven categories of like the internet that these things could be made into. So I had a box fabricated with these buttons on it, and then this installation would be like on a pedestal. You'd see that box. Um, you'd press a button based on a category that you wanted to hear, and you'd hear one of Brian's phrases. And then from the internet, from Bing image search, it would pull an image based on that phrase and project it onto this projection in a kind of random place with a random filter on it. This uses the software processing, if you ever heard of that. And then the speech recognition software would display the text on the screen. So you'd hear something, you'd see an image, and then you'd read something. And I was really interested in this simultaneous experience of media and like where things could get weird along the way. Um, like sometimes the computer would hear the same phrase twice and display text differently. Um, so I was like interested in the in and out, the like input output, the back and forth between a person and a computer. And these are some of the collages that the project made. And over time, they would fade away. So you might come into the gallery and it'd be an empty projection. But if it was a busy gallery, then you might see something like this. But you could contribute to it by pressing the button and adding images to it. Um, I just this really like ephemeral collage um, that could only exist like for a moment, really. Uh, Remember One Thing was a series of, if anybody, I don't know if you'd remember these or know what they are, but they're called autostereograms, and colloquially they were known as magic eye images. I kind of was interested in this phenomenon of something from my like childhood. These existed in like mall kiosks when I was probably 12. But if you ever have experienced it, it is a magic experience where like you look at this, which just looks like a pattern, an abstract pattern, and then your eyes kind of defocus, and then a 3D image comes out. So I made a series of these, um, a triptych, and based on these 90s TV characters, and each one has a hidden catchphrase. So I embedded text above the characters, the catchphrase for each of the characters, and I liked it as a sort of metaphor. Sorry, I'll go back. Metaphor for art that like some people would come in and just look at it and be like, okay, and just keep walking. And some people would be like, kind of understand what it was and be really transfixed and like staring at it and like looking like they were having this profound, art experience with these like inherently silly kind of pop culture objects. And then just technically, I had these printed on aluminum, which gave it a little bit of a glossy, like kind of a sheen. You can kind of see it in that photo. Um, and these are pretty big. These were like 30 by 40 each. I mentioned my wife, Sarah. We were in LA. She was an architect. This is when we were making work together in Kentucky. We tried to do like a promo photo shoot projecting. And we did a bunch of work together. We lived in St. Paul, Minnesota for a year and did a project about an intersection, the busiest intersection in St. Paul, and went and documented it with photo and video at different times of day. So like 6 a.m., 12 p.m., 6 p.m., and then 12 midnight. And then made it into a website, which still exists. And I haven't like updated the code on it. This was from, this is a while ago, maybe 2012, I think. And the fun thing about this, I think, is that you go to the website, whenever time of day you go to the website, it shows you. So if you go at night, it shows you the content from the night. If you go in the morning, it shows the morning and so forth. It's just a and I was playing with the idea, or we were playing with the idea of the title comes from establishing shot, which in film is when you see an external shot, usually of a location, and then like the next shot is inside. The classic one would be like on Seinfeld, they show Jerry's apartment building, and then like they show inside. So it was kind of playing with the idea of like a still versus slight movement or looping video. Which I think is interesting. Uh, the difference between a still image and a even if it's a still, like the camera isn't moving, but the footage is moving. Balancing Ground was a big project that we did in Minneapolis, which was for this thing called the Creative City Challenge. This is my first little bit of advice, but look for grants and opportunities and competitions and apply to them. Like you never know what'll happen. This was a big grant. It was like $75,000 to do this project. And we just got a team together and applied to it and won it and got to go for a summer and install this huge project. These were renderings of the project. We were really interested in the way that shadows could be formed by this structure. So Sarah and I designed this. She like made these renderings. And then it's like, how do you make this an interactive installation? Um, so we came up with the idea of making, this is what it looked like built. We interviewed a bunch of people in the community about their idea of balance. Like, what does balance mean? And that was basically the prompt, and recorded all these interviews. And then as you like moved through the space, there were sensors and like in a very kind of gentle, like not offensive way. I think the sound design was nice. You could just hear fragments of these interviews. And then we had the seesaws, or that the seesaw that when you moved up and down on it, it played. You can see there's a little bit, there's speakers on it. There's a white thing on the underside of it. It played words that people associated with balance as people went back and forth. And then if people actually balanced the seesaw, like worked with their partner, it would like kind of unlock this other channel of stuff that they could hear. So it was like playful and fun, but also like another layer was there if people wanted to experience that. Or and then it was lit at night so people could come uh, see it at night too. Oh, and then this might be a video, which I'll just kind of scan through so you can see what it looks like.
Talent,
Oh,
skill, and study, sharpened, polished, and
this is
honed
some of the
to
sound.
absolute intentional perfection.
Balance is point of departure.
Balance is living in a good way with all beings.
And living within a larger story,
Balance is flipping perspectives.
living within tradition.
Anyway, and then like from the photo documentation of that piece, we made a series of prints um, called shadow studies that were just, kind of manipulated images of the shadow forms that the piece created. I think like it's really interesting to make something and then think of sort of all the different stuff that you can squeeze out of it, right? Like, so this was this big, almost semi-building that installation that we made that, we had to hire a construction crew to help build and everything. But I just thought it was also interesting to make some like kind of more poetic 2D images out of the photo documentation. Silk Bloom was a commission that we did when we lived in Kentucky that was for the Breeders' Cup. It was if anybody knows anything about horse racing, every horse farm that raises horses has their own unique silk pattern. Silks are what the jockeys wear when they race them. So we're interested in these patterns. And I kind of like researched the patterns and then made a bunch of approximations of them. Uh, and Sarah had designed the forms of um, what these things might. We kind of imagine them as origami folded flowers out of metal. Um, and so, like, you can see here, they look sort of like pieces of paper. We made a little collection of them and then wrapped the jockey silks around them as like printed vinyl. And these are in Lexington, Kentucky, and they're actually still there. I checked on them uh, in April, and they're all at one site at a college there now. So it's nice. It's nice when your work. A lot of our work together was ephemeral and isn't doesn't exist anymore. But it's nice that that piece does. So that's kind of a line in our work. When we lived in, I was teaching in Kentucky uh, at Morehead State, and Sarah became ill with bacterial meningitis unexpectedly, and in 2017, and she passed away. And my son and I moved back to Boston. I started teaching at BU in 2018. So my work really shifted then for obvious reasons. Um, and I kind of hadn't made music in a long time, and I went back and made this album about Sarah and our life and our experience together. And the photos on I made the artwork. That these photos are all analog photos taken by like myself or my son, like uh, who was 4 at the time. And this album is available on vinyl. It's available to listen to on Bandcamp and Spotify and Apple Music and all that. But very proud of it as a piece, as a distillation of my experience. And each album comes with a Polaroid. So Neponset is a river that when we moved back, we moved into my mom's house that I grew up in, and the end of our street was the Neponset River, which delineates like the town where we lived in and Boston. Um, and I took a photo. If someone ordered the record, I would go down and take a photo of the river. So there's only like a super limited edition amount of them. So um, I could actually do that. It's not like there was 10,000 or whatever. And then the lyric sheet is a Riso print. And then here's a video from the album that I'm just going to show a little bit of. This was footage. This is footage from a video installation that we did in St. Paul. That's Sarah.
Pictures of you. I wanna live inside. I wanna live inside. Pictures of you. And pictures of you.
Okay. All right, we're getting into the home stretch here. Radius Collective. So I'm not sure how much Josh has talked about this, but it's an artist and designer collective that we are in together, and a lot of my like visual work over the last few years has been based on projects through that. I have stuff always kind of simmering or cooking in the background, but a lot of my work, I'm just going to talk about some of the work that we've done, I guess. This project, we had to interview each other. This is Pam. I kind of forgot that I had this bad photo of her.
Weird
Oh, it's a
because,
video. That's
like you were saying, I just don't think everyone really, I don't think they really know or understand alignment in the way that designers or artists do.
So we had to interview each other and then essentially figure out how to make a piece about the interview. And this is the transcript of the interview from Zoom, which back then it's funny, even, now you can get the Zoom summary and it's like it's very eerie and how someone was taking notes. I don't know if anybody's ever seen those or if you do that for class now, but back then it was like very kind of spit out, kind of proto spam stream where it's just like trying to transcribe. And it was it was very raw. And this was just a few years ago. Um, so I had this transcript, uh, and then um, I also had this audio piece that I like tried to save as a different file, and it became a text file strangely. So I was just really fascinated by the way that this looked. Um, and also the translation of media, how like an audio file, we think of it one thing, but it's just ones and zeros. How does a computer interpret that as a text file? So I had this file too. And then that same year, my dad passed away, who was an art teacher, for 35 years, and really obviously formative in what I thought about art and how I worked and how I perceived things. So I made this piece kind of about him. Again, like this was printed on aluminum, like with a remember one thing. I liked that experience of printing. But what I did was I had the transcript between Pam and I like as a layer, in a gridded layer, and then I overlaid some of that like audio file, and then I had some pictures of my dad in here. And growing up, like we would always go to his school. He's taught at a high school, and like his art shows were my first like experience of, what art was, and it was a lot of weird all boys high school art of like I don't even know what, but that was this kind of like this piece was sort of a layered formative, I guess, monument to my dad. Um, quickly, this was a piece picking up on my dad. Like he had this book when I was growing up that I used to like leaf through, and it was like kind of one of those things that you're like, what the hell was that? It was this photography showcase with all these like commercial photographers, and um there's definitely like some nudity in there, so I remembered it pretty well, and shouldn't have been looking at it probably, but I found this book going through my parents' attic, and like these are some of the images from it, ads and just a lot of like really commercial stylized images. And I was into the risograph at the time at BU. We had one, and I would just kind of mess around with it, and uh, I wanted to make like multicolored prints of these images. So I did that. I collected a bunch, and if you've ever used the risograph, I'm not sure if you have. I know you guys have one there, but the kind of accidents that come out of it are really nice. As you can see, like the overprint or the off alignment here. And so I made a collection of prints for a show that we had in Boston. And I just simple frames to kind of present them as like recontextualized images, um, with really nice warmth to them from the reso. Um, I got a typewriter at some point around that time, probably after I made that piece. I got a typewriter, and a lot of my work kind of shifted to that. A lot of like my ideas just sort of came out in words, and I also, with the full understanding that it's like it probably seems absurd and pretentious to like use a typewriter in 2026, but I'm going to talk about why I use it. Typing something, you it's there on paper. It's a totally different experience than if you write something, on your computer or even like on your notes app on your phone, which I absolutely use for different stuff too. But I might start something at 3 a.m. on my notes app and then type it out on the typewriter. The nice thing about being on the typewriter, it's on paper and it exists. And like you kind of type it and it's there, and then you deal with it later versus, the ability to digitally delete something changes how you write things. And I really like that it's just here. And my process is I type out a draft and then I go through with a pencil and edit it and then retype it and then go through with a pencil and edit it. It like slows the whole process down, which for this amount of text, like the poems that sorry, I'm writing poems here is what I'm doing. It's a really nice process. And I think it could be applicable to design and writing um, and a lot of slowing down and like incorporating some kind of analog process into your process can really change how you make stuff and what you make. Um, and then for an exhibition in Rome, I was like, well, I've made a bunch of poems. Um, how can I show them? This is kind of like what I want. This is what I'm interested in um, showing. So I edited these into a handful of them into these videos. And I was again like, you have the poem as a thing, and then what can you do with it then, right? You can make photocopies of it, you can hand it out to people, but like I was interested in like how do you make a time-based version of a poem? Um, and this is I actually just photographed the typed pages and then chopped them up and animated them in After Effects. Thinking about how the rhythm of editing could affect how someone reads a poem. And then in the gallery, it was just displayed on an old TV, thanks to our colleague Kristen, who was there to install it. And so it was a TV having the like typewriter text happening on it, which I thought was a nice way to see it. Um, and then the most recent piece that I made for Radius, we had a show in Lowell, Mass. Sorry, I forget that you guys are in Texas, which is a kind of old mill city northwest of Boston. One of our colleagues in the collective teaches there. I had found this, despite my best efforts late at night. I found the Zillow listing for the house that my wife Sarah and I and our son Lou lived in Kentucky. Um, and this was the Zillow listing when I had to sell it when she died, and so I typed it out and then found all the photos. That was our house, and then printed them out just like a CVS and used Mod Podge to just affix them to a big canvas that I had spackled and painted. I also wrote a list of all the stuff that we had done to the house with pencil, and then just in a simple grid. This is an interesting piece to me because it's one of those where you just start it and don't just kind of intuitively move through it and don't really know what the hell you're doing. And it's like, how do I organize these photos? Why am I doing this? And then like one of the people in the collective thought this was a door the whole time because it's like a huge canvas that's like the size of a door, but then it's like, why didn't I just put it on a door? I don't know. But the piece, it's cathartic and um, and that's what it looked like in the gallery. Kind of, this was at my house here, and then this was it in the gallery. And then lastly, Josh mentioned in my intro that I I taught at BU until like about a year and a half ago, and left the position there because I moved down to Fall River, which is far away, and I also came to really dislike teaching there for a very long, which I could explain in a very long story. So I started my own publishing house slash studio slash like anything that you can think of, called Carriage House. We have a carriage house, and the logo is kind of based on these unique windows that it has. The first thing that I put out under this moniker. It was a book of poetry, some of the poems that I had shown earlier, poems and images. And then here's a quick little flip through of the book. I had been shooting analog film over the last like 4 or 5 years. Just had rolls of film and shot them. And uh, when I lived in LA, I and Sarah was in grad school. I went to a lecture. It was a guy that worked on South Park. It wasn't one of the two main dudes there, but it was like a guy who worked as an animator or something. And I remember he said something that stuck with me, which was it's like a lot of people in this town have ideas. Everybody has ideas, but like very few people actually like make their ideas. So he's like, my advice to you is to always like make stuff. And that really stuck with me. And even something as simple as like shooting rolls of film, I never like really knew what I was going to do with any of these images, but I had them as like an archive. And then when it came time to make this book, I was like, these images were collected over the course of the time that I was writing this book. They work really well uh, with these poems, so I'm gonna just put them in the book. So the book is poems and images and film images. And here I think I ended with some. This is Cathedral Mountain and Alpine, or just south of Alpine. That was the view at Sarah's parents' house where we got married a long time ago. And a couple of these images. That's my son in Big Bend. That's Mule Ears behind him, if anybody's ever been down there. And then lastly, this it's like, all right, I have this book of poems now. What can I shake out of it? So I've started making some videos reading the poems, which
The past. The movie says we may be through with the past, but the past isn't through with us. A refrain or a heavy-handed theme. You
I'll just play it for a
see
second.
something when you're 19 and it feels different, means something different than when you're 31 or 40. All of these ages, the past now. The creeping suspicion that something you liked isn't cool anymore. Maybe it never was.
Okay. This, I think one of my close friends, I gave him the book and he was like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to read these poems. And which I thought was A, preposterous, but B, I was like, oh, maybe it would be interesting if I read them. And I kind of used my ability to make videos and like cinematic language. So rather than just like it's me in a room, but like, yes, I'm in a room, but you can see I'm using uh, different shots, close up, medium shot, wide shot, and kind of to stitch it together. So, that's it. Sorry. It was a lot. And oh, I have another slide. If you want to look at any of this stuff, my website is ckfield.com. So I go by CK Field as like my artist name because there's a lot of Christopher or Chris Fields out there. If you Google Christopher Field, I'm not the first one that comes up. So CK Field is like my artist name on Instagram. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Christopher. Um, yeah, I learned so much.
Sorry, there's a lot of slides in there.
No, it's great. Does anyone have any initial thoughts, reactions, questions?
What are your sorry. Thanks for talking to us. But also, what do your bandmates think of your album art?
Um, it's a good question. Our drummer TJ is works for Apple, like as like a pretty high design guy in San Jose. So he's very, you know, And like when we were younger, he always did the artwork. But as we've gotten older, I've kind of taken it over a little bit more. So he doesn't say too much about it, you know. I don't know. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know if you have any relationships with, you know, a friend or, you know, somebody, and sometimes you want to talk about something, but it's maybe silence is maybe the best thing. I don't know. I feel like if people didn't like stuff, they would. We've known each other for a long time, so they would. Uh,
Like if it was that important to bring up, they would say something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and it's like again, like that little anecdote about the South Park guy, like all this stuff. It's like if I don't really have advice for people, but I've never regretted like making something, and hopefully it was an interesting like detour through different kinds of stuff versus like, and here's another variation of like, you know, this series that I did. You know, it's that's what excites me is like kind of like where the idea takes you, and um, but the discovery of like trying something new also.
Yeah, I definitely like that's I guess what I appreciate the most about your work is just seeing a bunch of like unpolished stuff, not spinning forever on like one thing because that's like a thing I think is like having to untrain from like undergrad is always teaching you to like hone in your craft, and like be really good at least one or two things, like whether it's typography or like layout or whatever. And yeah, your take of just try a whole bunch of different things, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Master of a few, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and sort of, I think there's an element like if you, I mean, everybody has their own perspective, and like you're gonna like it's gonna something's gonna be at a certain. There's an element of craft to my work, but it's like it's it's defined by me and my taste. I don't like it's sort of um it's there. It's just it might be different than, you know, I wasn't like an undergraduate graphic design major. I certainly like taught a bunch of those kids, and like that's not my vibe really, you know. So I don't like it. I don't know. I think um the more stuff you make, the more you can figure out how to define your own level of craft, and like that can mean that means something differently in a poster versus like a video versus, a Figma board.
Right. Yeah. I only have one more on your balance. It was like that's
Yeah.
what the piece was called, right? Um, did you do so? I'm assuming when you say there was like sensors and stuff, was it like basic level? Like, did you use like Raspberry Pis or Arduinos for like that kind of stuff? Were you the one that programmed that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was Arduinos, and because that was 2013. I mean, I that's and I also like I kind of I did it, but then I was like, oh shit, this isn't working how I want it to work. So then like my brother-in-law is a software engineer, so he helped me with that. And I
Yeah.
think like that's another thing. Like I show, you know, you see the finished work, you see, I mean, I try to show some process, but um it's kind of collaboration is like hugely important. And like sometimes, especially in grad school, and like your kind of world is opening up to wow, like I can do all this stuff, and I'm like learning all this stuff. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. It's also good to know like your limits and be like, oh, like I can't figure this out, but maybe I can find someone who can help me figure it out. And then like you can collaborate with them, and then you make something that is different than it would have been if you had just kind of like rudimentally figured it out. So I always, starting with my band and like till now, like I'm always working with other people, and I think it's exciting to collaborate and like know your limits of it's there's nothing wrong. You don't have to do everything all the time, and I think if you can collaborate with people, if there's something that they can do that like accentuates a project in a way that whether it's a technical skill or just like getting a different voice or opinion on something, it's I think it's great. It kind of sucks in school sometimes. It's like it's like a forced group project, and like I could go on for hours about bad group projects in school, but so it's great when it's like something that you figured out for yourself or with friends or with people that you like to work with and or you like discover that. It's a great thing.
Sure. Thank you.
That was actually my question was about collaboration, but I feel like you covered that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's what's nice about a lot of the radius stuff is um I think we try to think of different ways to collaborate, every sort of year we have a different idea or prompt, and then we kind of as a group try to figure out what does that mean and how rather than try to repeat the same thing, like how might things change and it's yeah, it's a nice way at the very least it's like for me it's been a nice like external thing to keep driving, some part of my brain in that way. So
I think the other thing that stood out to me was how much documentation of your own work and process you do, and how that kind of leads to more things. Um, I think that's something I am not terribly good at. Slash, I think my default, like if I'm going to take a behind the scenes something, it's like, oh, I need to post this on Instagram because it needs to be used in some like promotional marketing way, like
yeah.
not to like make more work. Um, so I just appreciate that, seeing that, hearing
Yeah,
about
I
that.
mean, like I tried to talk about it, but I'm really fascinated by like once something exists, like how you can like especially digitally, sort of like once something exists and you make it into a file, it can be made into many different incarnations, and then sort of like, a project like Balancing Ground, it's a big outdoor installation, or it was, but like, what's it about? And then like, what's the concept? How, ideally it's experienced by someone like going into the installation but like, are there ways that even in like the documentation, like a documentation video, how do you like give somebody a sense of like what this thing is and, you know, what works and what does like, I just find that fascinating. Like, is a video the right way to show this idea? Is like a printed piece, is a book, like what's the best way to, um, and like sometimes it's everything, and that's interesting at like how you have to make choices based on what the how you're delivering the content to put it in a kind of more commercial way. Yeah.
Totally.
Um, Talking about ideas, like how usually you get your ideas? Like uh, you have worked in multidisciplinary sources. Like uh, how do you get the ideas? Like I will do this from I will pick this particular idea as well as I think it has potential in it or something like that. How you choose that?
Yeah. Um, it really, I mean, it depends. Some of like the work that Sarah and I did together, the public artwork, like the commissions and things, we really tried to get our ideas based on like the constraints of what the project was. So like all right, this is the budget for the project, and like this, it has to be in this location. So, all right, we're limited to like this kind of material or like this kind of thing. And then something be, I'm a huge fan of like using constraints to drive like the idea generation process. Because if you're just like sitting around trying to think of an idea, like it's never going to happen. A formative film that I don't know if people don't talk about it too much now, but I love it and is hugely helpful for this concept is called The Five Obstructions. It's the director Lars von Trier, who's crazy, and maybe you've seen or heard of some of his films, but it's a documentary from like the early 2000s, and it's basically him and an older Danish filmmaker, and this older Danish filmmaker has made this like famous film called The Perfect Human, and then Lars von Trier. The movie is a documentary about him, Lars von Trier, getting this older guy to remake his film five different times based on like these like crazy constraints that he's made him like you all right, you have to make this, but it has to be animation, or you have to make this and no shot can be longer than like 12 frames. And so um it's really entertaining and kind of kooky, but like Sarah and I always love that as like the constraints are your friend. Like, so if you can ever find, and while you're in school, that's part of when you're getting an assignment, it's like it needs to be this doing these are deliverables and blah blah blah. But like as you like make your own work or have a little bit more free reign to do that, if you can kind of find some constraints to put in there, and it could just be like, you know what, I just made something, I just made a book, so I don't want to make another book or whatever it is. There's that, and then there's just like the notes app at 3 a.m. When I can't sleep, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna put this. Here's an idea, and I'm just gonna again put it down. Don't worry about it, and then pull from that later and see if it makes any sense. So also, I will say a lot of my ideas start as things that I think are funny or like a joke, and then I'm like, wait, this is actually a good idea. So if don't dismiss something that seems frivolous or, I mean, as Josh said, like documentation, even if it's like, and I'm not somebody who like sits down and like journals or anything. It's just, but you don't need much. Just write something down on a piece of paper or in your phone and come back to it. Uh, or try to use constraints or check out that movie. You could probably watch it online somewhere.
It's the perfect human, right?
It's called The Five Obstructions,
Oh,
and
five.
then the
Oh,
original movie is called The Perfect Human. That's like a Danish short film that's like famous in Denmark, I guess.
yeah, I got it. It's 1968.
Yeah, but I think the movie is from like 2002 or something.
Hmm.
The documentary.
Nice. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Oh.
I really enjoyed your presentation. So I was looking your stream project.
Yeah.
So there's, I guess, version 1 and 2. How far they are, and is there version 3 coming or planning?
It's a great question. Well, version one was in when I was in grad school. Actually, like at the time, um, data visualization was big. Everybody was like doing these like data, but like we're doing like kind of interactive data visualizations. So that was actually my attempt at a data visualization project, which was supposed to be funny. I wasn't meaning it to be. It was legitimately me trying to visualize data, but I was trying to do it in a more like abstract way, I guess. Um, and then when I had a solo show at the University of Kentucky, which was great. Um, when you teach at a school, I got a grant to like make a bunch of work, and then I met someone who was opening this beautiful new gallery. Needed so like anyway, I got to do a solo show, and I developed like an update. I wanted to show spam stream in that piece. So the photos that I showed in this were from that. And the same guy who helped my brother-in-law Matt, who helped me with the coding on the seesaw that I mentioned, he had like co-developed that project with me. And we did like we built a custom. I had money, a little bit of money to like build a custom computer and install it. And uh, but then like I dug the computer out of the archives and he said it didn't work anymore. So like we, I think if we, but then like as I talk about it, I think a lot of the stuff was like prescient and interesting about the like how we communicate or like this like input and output with computers. But like again, I just feel like with like chat GPT and all this stuff that people just like have conversations now, it's like it's so moot or like, I don't know. It's getting at something different maybe, but I'd have to, I have no, I don't have an idea for what version 3 would be yet.
Maybe this could be from, so there's a lot of public ChatGPT threads that are public or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've also like, as you could tell, as the way at like the end of my presentation, like I've kind of gone. I was interested more in like tech stuff when I was in grad school because I don't know, I think like I felt like I needed to be or something. That was like my this like degree that I was doing. But I'm literally like typing poems on a typewriter now, so it'd be cool to circle back and like figure out ways because I still love the idea of installation work and interactivity and um again it's like it has to come from the like I don't, as I said at the start of my presentation, like I don't usually work like, oh, I want to do another like installation. I kind of think more of what's like, where does that idea take me? Um, and if I have an idea that it makes sense to be a like something like that, or becomes a little kernel that becomes the version 3 of SpamStream, like that's great. But I'll just have to, come up with that, I guess.
All right. Thanks, Christopher. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you all. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening. That was a lot of talking for me. And I appreciate having the audience and you know, if Phil, if anything comes up or you ever have a question or feel free to reach out. I'm 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 here.
Thanks, Christopher. We'll see you very soon.
Yeah, in May.
Yep.
I'll be there.
All right.
All
Have a
right.
good
Have a
night.
great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.